The words struck me with the force of a physical blow, each one a stone hurled against the fragile walls of my heart. If you don't like it, you can leave. My son's voice, a voice I had once soothed with lullabies and celebrated for its first whispered words, now echoed with a chilling finality through the halls of my own home. My Robert, my only child, was shouting at me, not with the fleeting frustration of a teenager, but with the cold, hard fury of a stranger. My name is Patricia Miller. I am 56 years old. For 30 of those years, I dedicated my life to shaping young minds as an elementary school teacher. For the past 8 years, since my husband Michael was taken from me by a sudden merciless heart attack, my world had revolved around my son. Today, he looked at me as if I were his sworn enemy. And what I am about to tell you is the story of how that look, that single moment of shattering betrayal, changed the course of my life forever. I was standing frozen before the doorway to my own bedroom, my mind struggling to process the scene before me. In my bed, nestled among my pillows and beneath the quilt my own mother had made, lay Mrs. Ellen, my daughter-in-law Danielle's mother. She was sound asleep, blissfully unaware of the tempest she had unleashed. Her things had colonized my sanctuary. Her floral-scented creams were arranged neatly on my dresser. Her clothes hung in my closet, their foreign textures brushing against my own. Her slippers were placed precisely beside my nightstand, as if they had always belonged there. It was a silent, complete invasion. I was the intruder in my own life. Robert, I tried to speak, but my voice was a strangled whisper, caught in the knot of disbelief tightening in my throat. I had just returned from a week-long work trip, a grueling 7 days of conferences and workshops. The 6-hour bus ride home had left me weary to the bone, my only solace the thought of sinking into my own familiar bed. And this is what I had come home to. No, Mom, enough. Robert's voice sliced through my shock. His eyes, the same warm brown eyes that had once looked at me with pure adoration, were now bloodshot with a rage I had never witnessed. In all my 56 years, I had never seen such a look on his face, not even in the depths of his grief at his father's funeral. Mrs. Ellen is going through a terrible time, he said, his voice laced with an accusatory edge. She needs peace. She needs a comfortable space. And you come storming in here, making a scene over a simple room. A simple room. The words felt like ash in my mouth. Robert, it's my room, it is my bed, this is my house. It's our house, he roared, his voice louder this time, shaking the very air between us. We live here. Danielle and I pay the utilities. We have rights too. Each word was a poisoned dart finding its mark. I felt the floor tilt beneath my feet, the world spinning out of focus. She needs comfort, he continued, his tone dropping slightly but losing none of its brutal hardness. She's your granddaughter's grandmother. Danielle is devastated seeing her mother in such pain, and all you can think about is yourself. But I tried to form a sentence, to explain, to reason. If you find it so difficult to help, he cut me off, his words sharp and merciless. If you can't show a little empathy, if your personal comfort is more important than the well-being of this family. He paused, and in that brief silence, he looked at me with a contempt so profound it stole the breath from my lungs. A contempt I never imagined I would see in the eyes of my own child. Then leave. Nobody is forcing you to stay. If you find it so unbearable, you can leave. The silence that followed was a living thing, vast and suffocating. You can leave. 2 words. A death sentence. They erased 30 years of unwavering love. They rendered me invisible. A stranger in the home Michael and I had built with our own 2 hands. There I was, a 56-year-old widow, my entire life a testament to my devotion to the man standing before me, and he was casting me out. For his mother-in-law, a woman he had known for a mere 6 years. Danielle appeared in the hallway then, a silent specter behind her husband. My granddaughter, Sophia, was asleep in her arms, her small face peaceful, oblivious to the destruction of our family. Danielle said nothing. She simply looked at me, her expression a carefully constructed mask of weary patience, an unspoken plea for me to be reasonable, to not make things difficult. I opened my mouth, a flood of unspoken history rushing to my lips. I wanted to scream. I wanted to remind him of the nights I had stayed awake when he had pneumonia at age 5, my hand never leaving his feverish forehead. I wanted to remind him of the gold earrings I had sold, my last piece of jewelry from my mother, to help pay for his college textbooks. I wanted to remind him of how I had held him, a grown man shaking with grief, at his father's funeral. But the words would not come. I remained silent, because some silences are heavier than 1,000 words. And my silence was weighted with 3 decades of unconditional love, a love that had just been discarded like yesterday's trash. With a slowness that felt ancient, I bent down and picked up my suitcase. My travel clothes felt rumpled and foreign on my skin. I could still smell the stale air of the bus, the scent of exhaustion. I gave my son one last look, not at Robert, my sweet boy, but at this cold, unrecognizable man who wore his face, and I left. I walked down the stairs, each step, a phantom limb, a memory. Here I had carried him when he was learning to walk. There, he had fallen and scraped his knee, his cries echoing until I scooped him into my arms. On this landing, we would sit on hot summer afternoons, sharing popsicles and secrets. I could hear Robert's ragged breathing from the top of the stairs. I could feel his gaze on my back, but I did not turn around. If I saw that coldness in his eyes one more time, I knew I would shatter completely. I walked out the front door, the same door I had crossed with a newborn Robert, wrapped in a blue blanket, my heart so full of love and hope, I thought it might burst. The world I walked out into was no longer the same. The next few hours were a blur of numb movement. I found myself at the Colonial Hotel, a modest but clean establishment on the edge of town. Room 203 smelled of lavender and loneliness. I sat on the edge of the bed, my unopened suitcase a silent monument to my displacement. And for the first time since leaving my home, the tears came. Not gentle tears of self-pity, but racking sobs of profound loss. I wasn't just crying for the room or the house. I was crying for what we had been, for the unbreakable bond that had just been violently severed. Because there was a time, not so long ago, when Robert and I were everything to each other. He was born on March 14th, after 18 hours of grueling labor. My husband, Michael, had been my rock, his hand in mine, his voice a steady anchor in a sea of pain. When we finally heard that first powerful cry, we had looked at each other, our eyes filled with a love so immense it reshaped our universe. Our lives had just begun. Robert was an easy baby, as if he knew he was entering a world of boundless love. He slept through the night, he ate with gusto, and his smiles were as plentiful as the summer sunshine. But more than anything, he was affectionate. He was a mama's boy, as Michael would say with a proud laugh. He would snuggle against my chest, his chubby little hands caressing my face, his presence a constant warm reassurance. That connection, that deep and wordless understanding, seemed indestructible. I remembered the afternoons after school. I would arrive home, drained from a long day of teaching, but my fatigue would vanish the moment I saw him. He would be waiting at the window, his small face pressed against the glass. "Mommy, Mommy's home," he would shout, launching himself into my arms as if we had been separated for years, not just a few hours. Michael worked for a construction company, a job that was hard on his body but provided for his family. We lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment in the city, a place where the 3 of us were always bumping into each other, but we were happy. It was a home filled with laughter and love. Someday, Michael would whisper to me, his arms wrapped around my waist as I stood at the stove. "We're going to have our own house. A house with a yard for Robert to run in, a big kitchen, a room just for us." That someday felt like a distant dream, but it was a dream we nurtured together. It arrived when Robert was 8 years old. For years, we had saved every spare dollar, every forgotten coin, in an old cookie tin hidden in the back of our closet. It was our secret treasure, a collection of wrinkled bills and loose change that represented our future. We bought a small plot of land on the outskirts of town, a patch of earth that was entirely ours. Michael, with his builder's mind, designed the house himself. A simple sketch on a napkin evolved into a set of blueprints. 2 stories, 3 bedrooms, a welcoming front porch. We built it ourselves, little by little, weekend by weekend. Michael would lay bricks, his hands calloused and strong. I would mix cement, my muscles aching in a way they never had before. Robert would play among the half-finished walls, his imagination turning the construction site into a castle, a spaceship, a fortress. "This is going to be my room, right, Daddy?" he would ask, pointing to a sunlit corner. "Right here, champ," Michael would reply, his voice filled with pride. It took us 3 years. 3 years of sweat, sacrifice, and unwavering determination. But the day we laid the last tile in the bathroom, the three of us stood in the middle of the empty living room, wrapped in a group hug, and we cried. Tears of exhaustion, tears of joy, tears of accomplishment. "It's ours," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. "Completely ours. Nobody can ever take this away from us." We moved in on a sweltering afternoon in July. Robert was 11. I will never forget the look of pure ecstasy on his face as he ran through the house, his shouts of joy echoing off the new walls. He raced up and down the stairs, opened and closed every door, and looked out every window. "It's huge, Mommy," he had exclaimed. "It's the most beautiful house in the world." That night, with no furniture yet, we ate dinner sitting on the living room floor. Hot dogs and French fries from the local diner, eaten out of paper bags. The three of us, a perfect triangle of love and happiness. "Let's make a toast," Michael said, raising his soda can. "To this house. To this family. To always being together." We clinked our cans, and in that moment, looking at the two people I loved more than life itself, I felt a sense of peace so profound I was sure it would last forever. The years passed. Robert grew from a boy into a teenager, and then into a fine young man. He was responsible, studious, and never lost that affectionate nature that had defined him as a child. When he was 17, a shadow began to fall over our perfect life. Michael started to feel unwell. Pains in his chest, a deep and persistent tiredness he dismissed as just part of getting older. He was only 52. One Sunday morning, as we sat around the breakfast table, Michael's hand flew to his chest. His face turned a deathly shade of gray. He collapsed from his chair before Robert or I could even react. "Dad!" Robert screamed, his voice cracking with terror. The ambulance arrived in what felt like an eternity, but it was only 15 minutes. It wasn't enough. Michael died on the way to the hospital. A massive, sudden heart attack. No warning. No goodbye. My world simply ceased to exist. In the dark, shattered days that followed, Robert, my 17-year-old son, became my anchor. He held me when I sobbed through the long, empty nights. He handled the funeral arrangements with a maturity far beyond his years. "It's okay, Mommy," he would tell me, his own grief pushed aside to comfort mine. "I'm here. You're not alone." For months, I was a ghost in my own life. Robert took over. He cooked, he cleaned, he brought me tea. He would sit with me in silence, his presence a comforting weight in the crushing emptiness. "I'm never going to leave you, Mommy," he promised me one night, his hand holding mine. "No matter what happens, I'll always be here for you." That promise was the lifeline that pulled me back from the brink. Slowly, I began to heal. Robert went to college, studying business administration and working part-time jobs to help with the bills. He never complained. He never made me feel like a burden. "This house is yours, Mommy," he would say whenever I tried to give him money. "You and Dad built it. It's the least I can do." He graduated with honors and landed a good job in sales. And then he met Danielle. At first, I was thrilled. She was polite, pretty, and she seemed to make Robert happy. They married 2 years later in a small, beautiful ceremony. "Take care of him," I had whispered to Danielle, my heart swelling with a mix of joy and sorrow. "He's the best man I know." "I know," she had replied with a sweet smile. "I'm very lucky." The following year, Sophia was born, my granddaughter, my joy. Holding her for the first time, I felt Michael's presence beside me, a sense that the circle of life was continuing, that everything would be okay. Robert and Danielle were living in a cramped, expensive apartment in the city. Danielle often complained about the lack of space, the constant noise. "Why don't you come live with me?" I offered one evening. "There's more than enough room. Sophia can have the yard. You can save money." Robert looked at me with those eyes full of gratitude that I knew so well. "Are you sure, Mommy?" I was more than sure. This house is too big for me alone. I miss having life in these halls. They moved in 3 months later, and for a while, it was perfect. I helped with Sophia. I cooked. I cleaned. I felt needed. I felt like part of a family again. But then, Mrs. Ellen appeared. At first, her visits were brief, a weekend here, a week there. But they grew longer, and with each extended stay, I felt myself becoming more and more invisible in my own home. Danielle's tone changed. The respect in her voice was replaced by a subtle impatience. Robert stopped asking about my day. Sophia began to prefer her other grandma. I said nothing. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself things would go back to normal. How wrong I was. And now, sitting in this sterile hotel room, the cold reality crashed down on me. I hadn't lost my son in a single explosive moment. I had lost him incrementally day by day in 1,000 small, silent surrenders. I had lost him without ever realizing he was gone. A sharp knock on the door startled me from my reverie. It was Mr. David Salazar, my late husband's trusted friend and lawyer. He held a manila envelope, his expression grave. "Patricia," he said, his voice gentle, "are you absolutely 100% sure about this?" I looked up at him, my tear-stained face a mask of newfound resolve. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. More sure than I have ever been about anything in my life. "Very well," he said with a decisive nod. "Let's sign this. Tomorrow morning, first thing, I will deliver it myself." I signed each page without a tremor in my hand. With each stroke of the pen, I felt something hardening inside me, a core of steel forming around my shattered heart. My son had forgotten a fundamental lesson, a lesson I had taught him as a child. Actions have consequences, and he was about to learn that lesson in the harshest way imaginable. That night was a sleepless vigil. I sat on the hotel bed, the city lights painting muted patterns on the ceiling, and replayed the last few years in my mind. I searched for the signs I had missed, the red flags I had ignored. At 6 o'clock in the morning, I rose, showered, and dressed. I chose a simple pair of black slacks and a crisp white blouse. I styled my hair carefully and applied a touch of lipstick. I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me broken. Mr. David arrived at precisely 8 o'clock, the legal notice prepared. It was a cold, formal document, as cold as the contempt in my son's eyes. "Do you want me to go alone?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. "You don't have to be there." "No," I replied, my own voice steady and firm. "I am going with you. I want him to see my face." The drive to my house was a silent journey through a landscape of memories. The morning sun cast a golden glow on the garden Michael and I had planted together, the flowers blooming in a riot of defiant color. From the outside, it was a picture of domestic tranquility. No one would ever guess the war raging within its walls. Mr. David knocked 3 times, the sound echoing in the still morning air. Danielle opened the door, Sophia balanced on her hip. When she saw me, her face shifted through a series of emotions. Surprise, then discomfort, then a flicker of annoyance. "Patricia," she began, "we weren't expecting—" "Good morning, Mrs. Jones," Mr. David interrupted, his tone all business. "I am David Salazar, an attorney. I am here to deliver a legal notice." Robert appeared behind Danielle, his hair disheveled, still in his pajamas. His eyes hardened the moment they met mine. "What is this, Mom?" I did not answer. I simply stood my ground, my posture straight, my head held high. Mr. David extended the envelope. "It is an eviction notice. You have 24 hours to vacate this property." A heavy, profound silence descended. Danielle's face drained of all color. Robert took the envelope with a trembling hand. He tore it open and began to read. I watched his expression morph from confusion to disbelief, and then to a burning, incandescent fury. "Is this a joke?" His voice shook. "Are you seriously kicking me out of my own house?" "No," I replied, my voice a calm, level river in the midst of his emotional storm. "I am reminding you whose house this is." "But Mom—" "Don't call me Mom." The words escaped me, sharp and cold as ice. "Yesterday, you were not my son. Yesterday, you were a man who screamed at me, who humiliated me, who told me to leave. So I left. And now, you must leave too." "That was different," he stammered. "I didn't mean—" "You didn't mean what, Robert? That I should get lost? That my feelings were irrelevant?" "Because that is precisely what you said." Danielle burst into tears, and Sophia, sensing the tension, began to wail. "Patricia, please," Danielle pleaded, her voice choked with manufactured distress. "There has to be another way. We can't just leave in 24 hours. Where will we go with a child? You should have thought of that yesterday," I said, my gaze unwavering. "When you installed your mother in my bedroom, when you stood by and allowed your husband to treat me like a stranger in the house my husband and I built from the ground up." At that moment, Mrs. Ellen descended the stairs. She was wearing one of my bathrobes. My bathrobe, the audacity of it sent a fresh wave of anger through me. "What is all this commotion?" she asked, her voice dripping with irritation. I looked her directly in the eye, holding her gaze for the first time without flinching. "What is happening, Mrs. Ellen, is that you and your daughter's family have exactly 24 hours to remove yourselves from my property." "What?" Her face twisted into a sneer of disbelief. "How dare you? Robert, do something. The notice is legal and binding," Mr. David interjected calmly. "If the property is not vacated voluntarily within the specified time frame, we will proceed with a court-ordered eviction, and believe me, you do not want to go down that road." Robert stared at me, his eyes wide with a horrified incomprehension, as if I had transformed into a monster before him. "I can't believe you're doing this to me, Mom. We're your family." "Exactly, Robert. We are family. Or at least we were. Until you decided that my worth was less than that of a near stranger. Until you chose her mother over your own. She needed my help. And I was your mother." My voice finally broke. The pain of a lifetime of love betrayed spilling out. "I was your mother, and you threw me out like I was nothing." Tears streamed down my face, but they were not tears of weakness. They were tears of righteous fury, of 30 years of devotion being trampled underfoot. "You traded me for her," I continued, pointing a trembling finger at Mrs. Ellen. "You gave her my room, my space, my place in this home, and when I dared to object, you told me to leave. Well, I have left, and now it is your turn." Mr. David placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Patricia, let's go. Everything that needs to be said has been said." He was right. There was nothing more. I turned to leave, but I paused at the threshold, turning back one last time. 24 hours, I said, my voice clear and steady. Not 1 minute more. We walked away, leaving them standing in stunned silence on the porch. As Mr. Untenable and S/Untenable land. David drove away. I caught a glimpse of Robert in the side mirror, the white envelope clutched in his hand, his face a mask of utter devastation. Perhaps he thought I would crumble, that I would come back begging. He didn't know me at all. For the first time in my life, I was drawing a line in the sand. And I was not going to back down, even if it tore my soul in two. Back in the sterile quiet of my hotel room, I finally allowed myself to collapse. I cried harder than I had since Michael's death, a gut-wrenching torrent of grief for the son I had lost, for the family that was no more. But then, something unexpected happened. My phone began to ring. It was Martha, my neighbor for over 30 years. "Patricia, honey, what on earth is going on?" I saw the lawyer's car. The whole town is buzzing. In a small town, news travels faster than wildfire. "Martha, I don't want to talk about it," I managed to say, my voice hoarse. "That's all right, dear, but I want you to know, my home is open to you. And if that boy of yours has done you wrong, well, he's going to have to answer to a lot more people than just you." I hung up, and it rang again. It was Carol from the bakery. Then Rose, my former colleague from school. Then Joe, the pharmacist. One after another, the calls poured in. Offers of help, words of support, reassurances that I was not alone. And in that moment, I understood. Robert thought I was isolated. He thought I was dependent on him, that without him, I would be lost. He was wrong. I had spent 3 decades weaving myself into the fabric of this town. I had taught their children to read. I had celebrated their weddings and mourned at their funerals. I had been a constant, steady presence in their lives. And now, in my hour of greatest need, they were being a presence in mine. What Robert was about to discover was that his mother was not some helpless old woman. She was a beloved member of a community that was now rising up to defend one of its own. And the next 24 hours were going to be the longest and most difficult of his life, because he had not just alienated his mother, he had alienated an entire town. And in a place like this, such a transgression is not easily forgiven or forgotten. The hours that followed felt surreal. I sat in that hotel room, a command center of unexpected solidarity, as my phone continued its relentless ringing. It seemed every person I had ever shared a kind word with was reaching out. That boy has no shame, Mrs. Lucy from across the street told me, her voice crackling with indignation, kicking out his own mother. My husband and I watched you and Michael build that house, brick by painful brick. We saw you break your back mixing cement. That house is your soul, Patricia. It is yours, period. Thank you, Lucy, was all I could manage, my throat tight with unshed tears. The calls became a chorus of support. Mr. Peterson, who ran the corner newsstand, called to offer himself as a character witness for anything I might need. I saw you raise that child, Patricia, he said, his voice gruff but kind. With so much love and sacrifice, what he's done is a disgrace. Rose, my friend and former teaching partner, arrived at the hotel with a suitcase filled with her own clothes. Here, she said, pushing it into my hands. I figured you only had what you packed for your trip, and don't you dare say no. We've been friends for 20 years. Carol from the bakery sent over a box of pastries and a large thermos of hot coffee with a note that read, "So you don't go hungry, sweetheart. If you need money, you just say the word." I was overwhelmed, adrift in a sea of kindness I had never expected. For so long, my identity had been wrapped up in being a mother, a wife, a teacher. I had never stopped to consider the intricate network of relationships I had built outside the walls of my home, the quiet impact I had made on the lives of others. And now, that network was holding me up, a safety net I never knew existed. It was around 3 o'clock in the afternoon when my phone buzzed with a number that made my heart stop. Robert. For a long moment I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the screen. A part of me, the wounded part, wanted to ignore it. But another part, the mother in me, needed to hear his voice. I answered. Mom. His voice was different. The anger was gone, replaced by a soft, pleading tone. Mom, we need to talk. Hello, Robert. Please, Mom. This is insane. You can't just throw us out on the street like this. We're your family. Yesterday, you threw me out. I didn't mean it like that. I was angry. I was frustrated. Danielle was so upset about her mother, and I lost my head. But it wasn't serious. I let his words hang in the heavy silence between us. Mom, please say something. It wasn't serious, I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. You screamed at me. You humiliated me in front of your wife and her mother. You kicked me out of my own house, and you have the audacity to say it wasn't serious. Do you have any idea how that feels, Robert? To have the son you would die for look at you with such hatred and tell you to leave? I'm sorry, he whispered, his voice cracking. I'm truly, truly sorry. Are you sorry? Or are you just sorry that you now have to find a place to live in less than 24 hours? I could hear his ragged breathing on the other end of the line. He was crying. Mom, we have nowhere to go. The apartment we used to have is already rented. We can't afford a hotel for long, not with Sophia. Danielle is a wreck. Her mother has a heart condition, you know. All this stress, it's killing her. And there it was. The excuse. Always the excuse when it came to Mrs. Ellen. And what about my heart, Robert? What about my stress? Does my well-being not matter? Or am I, as your mother, just expected to endure everything without complaint? That's not it, Mom. You know I love you. I don't know that, Robert. Not anymore. Yesterday, it looked like you loved your mother-in-law more than me. She's going through a major depression. Her husband left her 2 months ago. She's devastated. Danielle is all she has. For a fleeting second, my resolve wavered. Depression. Abandonment. I knew that pain intimately. I had lived it when Michael died. But then I remembered. Robert, when your father died, who was there for you? Silence. It was you, he finally mumbled. You held me together. You told me you would never leave me. And I believed you. I trusted that promise with every fiber of my being. And now, the moment someone else needs you, you discard me as if I am disposable. It's not the same, Mom. You're right, it's not the same. Because I never asked you to throw anyone out of their home for my sake. I never demanded you give my place to someone else. I never screamed at you that if you didn't like it, you could leave. I could hear his sobs clearly now. Mom, please, just give me one more chance. Let me fix this. We can talk. You had your chance, Robert. You had it yesterday when you chose to defend that woman over your own mother. 24 hours. That's all you have. I ended the call, my hand trembling. My heart was a battleground, a war between the mother who wanted to forgive and the woman who demanded respect. But this time, the woman was winning. Enough was enough. I had to stand firm, for my own sake. My phone rang again almost immediately. An unknown number. "Hello, is this Mrs. Patricia Miller?" A young, professional-sounding woman's voice. "Yes, this is she. My name is Sarah Jenkins. I'm a reporter with the local newspaper. We've received a tip that you're involved in a legal dispute with your son. We'd like to get your side of the story." My blood ran cold. "How did you find out?" "Ma'am, this is a very small town. And you were a beloved teacher here for 30 years. You taught half the people in this town. People talk." "I have no comment," I said quickly, my mind reeling. "I understand this is a difficult time, but your story could be very important. There are many elderly parents in similar situations who—" I hung up, my head spinning. The newspaper? This was spiraling out of control. Before I could even process it, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find Martha, my neighbor, but she wasn't alone. Behind her stood Rose, Carol, Mr. Peterson, and a dozen other familiar faces from town. "Patricia," Martha said, taking my hands in hers. "We're here for you." They filed into my small hotel room, filling it with their warmth and concern. "We want you to know something," Mr. Peterson began, his voice firm. "What your son did is not right, and we, as a community, are not going to stand for it." "What do you mean?" I asked, confused. "It means," Carol said, her arms crossed, "that if he or his family need anything from this town, they won't get it. My bakery won't be selling them bread. The pharmacy won't fill their prescriptions. The market won't sell them groceries." "But you can't do that," I protested, alarmed. "There's a child involved." "My granddaughter. The child is innocent in all this," Rose interjected gently. "But your son needs to learn that his actions have real-world consequences. He can't treat his mother this way and expect life to go on as normal." "Besides," Mrs. Lucy added, "you are staying with me tonight. I have a spare room. You will not spend another night in a hotel. And I'll help with your legal fees," Mr. Peterson said. "I have savings." I was speechless, looking at these people, my people, who were willing to go to war for me. "I don't know what to say," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "Well, you should have expected it," Martha said, pulling me into a fierce hug. "Patricia, you have been there for every single one of us. When my boy was failing math, you stayed after school every day to tutor him. When Carol's husband passed, you were the first person at her door with a hot meal. You have given so much to this town. It's time you let the town give something back to you." The tears came again, but this time they were tears of overwhelming gratitude. They stayed for an hour, sharing stories and coffee, and for the first time in days, I laughed. When they left, the room felt empty, but I no longer felt alone. I looked at my phone and saw a new message from an unknown number. "Mrs. Miller, my name is Mary. I was in your third-grade class 15 years ago. I heard what happened. If you need a place to stay, my husband and I have a guest apartment that is yours for as long as you need it. No cost. It's the least I can do for the teacher who taught me that I could be somebody." I read the message 3 times, a profound realization dawning on me. I had thought my world consisted only of Robert. I had thought he was all I had left, but I was wrong. I had a whole town. I had generations of students, decades of friendships, a community that respected me, that valued me. And Robert, my son, was about to find out that the woman he had cast aside was far from alone, and that the consequences of his actions were only just beginning to unfold. The 24-hour deadline was approaching, and what would happen when it expired was going to change all of our lives, forever. That final night in the hotel was an eternity of restless thoughts. Sleep was a distant shore I couldn't reach. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Robert's face, a phantom of anguish and regret from our phone call. The mother in me, that primal, instinctual part of my soul, ached to go to him, to smooth his hair and tell him everything would be all right. But the woman he had wounded, the woman who was finally reclaiming her own worth, held me fast. This time, I had to see it through. At 6:30 in the morning, my phone vibrated with a message from an unknown number. "Mrs. Miller, it's Monica from next door. I need to tell you something urgent. It's about Danielle and her mother. There are things you need to know. Can we meet?" My heart began to pound a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "What things?" I typed back immediately. "I can be at your hotel at 7:30. Perfect." A sense of dread and grim curiosity settled over me. I couldn't sleep after that. I just sat and waited for the dawn, and for whatever truth it was about to bring. Monica arrived punctually, a large manila folder clutched in her hands, her expression somber. "Patricia," she said as we sat down in my room, "I debated for a long time whether to do this. I don't like getting involved, but what they've done to you is not right. You deserve to know the whole truth." She opened the folder and pulled out a stack of printed pages. They were screenshots. "My daughter Clara is friends with Danielle on social media," she explained. "A few months ago, Clara noticed Danielle started posting strange things, vague, passive-aggressive memes about difficult mothers-in-law. She showed me the first page. It was a Facebook post from Danielle. It read, 'Mothers-in-law always think the house is theirs, even when they're living on your charity.' A sharp, cold pain pierced my chest. Charity. There's more," Monica said softly, handing me another sheet. This one was from 3 weeks ago. "Tired of my husband always putting his mom before his own family. It's time for him to grow up and realize who his real priority is." My hands trembled as I held the paper. "Patricia, your daughter-in-law has been systematically undermining you online for months. My daughter saved all of this because she thought it was cruel. When we heard what happened yesterday, I knew I had to show you. Does Robert know about any of this?" I asked, my voice a hoarse whisper. "I don't know," Monica replied. "But there's something else. This," she said, handing me a third page, "is a private message exchange between Danielle and a friend. The date was from 2 months ago, right around the time Mrs. Ellen's visit started getting longer." I read the words, and the world tilted on its axis. "Danielle, I can't take living here anymore. Patricia is involved in everything. How I raise Sophia, how I cook, how I breathe. Friend, what does Robert say? Danielle, he's a lost cause, a total mama's boy. But my mom gave me a brilliant idea. If she moves in for a while, it will make Patricia so uncomfortable she'll want to leave on her own. And once she's gone, the house is ours. Friend, what if she doesn't leave? Danielle, oh, she'll leave. Robert will be forced to choose, and I know who he'll choose." It was a plan, a cold, calculated, malicious plan. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a moment of frustration. It was a deliberate conspiracy to drive me out of my own home. My mind raced, connecting the dots. The subtle digs, the dismissive comments. Robert's growing distance. It had all been orchestrated. "Why?" I asked aloud. The word, a gasp of pain. "My daughter says Danielle has always been intensely jealous of your relationship with Robert," Monica explained gently. "She felt she could never compete, and the house, well, it's a valuable property. If you were gone, they could live there mortgage-free, and maybe even convince Robert to sign it over to them eventually." A deep, slow-burning rage began to smolder in the pit of my stomach. It was a rage directed not just at them, but at my own blindness. "There's one last thing," Monica said, her voice heavy with apology. "This is from 3 days ago, right before you left for your trip. It was another message. Danielle, Patricia is gone for a week. This is the perfect opportunity. Friend, for what? Danielle, for my mom to take over her room. When she gets back and finds her there, she'll flip out. She'll make a huge scene, and Robert will have to choose a side. And when he chooses wrong, she'll leave of her own accord. We won't even have to kick her out. Friend, are you sure Robert won't choose his mom? Danielle, he won't. I've been working on him for months. He's already convinced his mom is overbearing and controlling. He'll choose me, I know it." I closed my eyes, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place with sickening clarity. I had walked right into their trap. By leaving, by serving the eviction notice, I was playing my part in Danielle's twisted little play exactly as she had written it. Monica left the folder with me and gave my shoulder a squeeze before she departed. I was alone with the evidence of my own betrayal, the truth printed in stark black and white. My son hadn't just changed overnight. He had been poisoned, slowly, deliberately. Danielle had spent months dripping venom into his ear, painting me as the villain in our story. I looked at the clock. 9 o'clock in the morning. 3 hours until the deadline. I picked up the phone and called Mr. David. "I need you at the hotel. Now. There's something you have to see." He arrived in 20 minutes, his face a mask of concern. I laid out the pages on the bed, and he read them in silence, his expression growing darker with each one. "This is premeditated," he said finally, his voice grim. "This is parental alienation. This changes everything. We could sue—" "No." I interrupted him. "I don't want a long, messy legal battle." "Then what do you want, Patricia?" I looked at the poisonous words scattered across the bedspread. "I want my son to see this," I said, my voice filled with a new, unshakable resolve. "I want him to know the truth of the woman he married. And then he can decide for himself what he wants to do." "Are you sure?" he asked. "Once he sees this, there's no going back. His marriage is already a lie, Mr. David. It's time he woke up." At 11:45, I left the hotel. Mr. David insisted on driving me. We arrived at my house at precisely 12 o'clock. The deadline had passed. Several cars were parked out front. "They brought backup," Mr. David murmured. I walked up the path and knocked on my own front door. Danielle opened it. Her eyes were red and swollen, but her expression was one of pure defiance. "You're here," she said, her voice cold. "The deadline is up," I replied, matching her tone. I entered, and my breath caught in my throat. The living room was filled with at least 15 people, a silent jury of Danielle and her mother's friends and family, all staring at me with open hostility. Robert stood by the window, his gaze fixed on the floor. "Well," Mr. David said, breaking the tense silence, "the legal time frame has expired. I trust you are prepared to leave." A sharp-dressed woman I didn't recognize stepped forward. "I am Jessica Brown," she announced. "I represent the Jones family. They have retained counsel." My heart sank. "It means," the lawyer continued with a smug smile, "that my clients have a legal right to this property, and we are formally challenging your eviction notice." "What rights?" I stammered. Danielle stepped forward, a sheaf of papers in her hand, her face alight with triumph. "These rights." She thrust them at me. They were official-looking documents, notarized and stamped. It was a deed of gift, dated 3 years ago, right after they had moved in. According to the document, I had signed over usufruct rights to the property to them indefinitely, with a clause stating I could not revoke it without 90 days' notice and just cause. "This is a forgery," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I never signed this." "Your signature is right there," Danielle said, pointing. And it was. My own handwriting, clear as day. A fuzzy memory surfaced through the fog of my shock. 3 years ago, signing some papers. Danielle had told me they were bank forms, to add Robert to my account as a beneficiary. "They tricked me," I said, the words catching in my throat. "They lied to me." "You'll have to prove that in court," the lawyer said dismissively. "In the meantime, this contract is legally valid. You can't evict them." I looked at Robert, my last hope. "Robert, did you know about this?" He finally looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw the one thing that broke me more than all the lies: guilt. "Danielle told me it was just for security," he mumbled, his voice weak. "In case anything ever happened to you, I didn't know she was going to—" "Going to what?" Danielle cut in sharply. "Use our legal rights when your mother tries to throw us out on the street for no reason?" "I threw you out because you threw me out first," I yelled, the last of my composure shattering. "Because you screamed at me." "You're the one who overreacts to everything," Danielle shot back, her voice dripping with contempt. "We asked for one simple favor, and you made it into a world-ending drama, as always. You're always the victim, aren't you? Poor, pitiful Patricia." "Enough, Danielle," Robert said weakly. But she turned on him, her eyes blazing. "Seriously, Robert? She humiliated us in front of the entire town, and you're still defending her? It's always her, isn't it? Always your mommy. When are you going to grow up and realize that I am your family now? Me and Sophia, not her." The silence in the room was absolute. I looked at my son, this broken man who stood by and said nothing while his wife ripped my heart to shreds. "Aren't you going to say anything?" I asked him, my voice barely a whisper. "Are you going to let her speak to me like this?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked down at the floor again, and his silence was the loudest, most painful answer he could have given. "Very well," I said, a strange, chilling calm settling over me. "The contract may be valid. I can't kick you out in 90 days. Danielle's lips curved into a triumphant smirk. "But," I continued, my voice gaining strength, "the deed to this house is in my name, and my name alone, which means I can do other things. I can call the utility companies and have the power shut off. I can have the water shut off. The gas. I can make your 90 days here very, very uncomfortable." Danielle's smile vanished. "You wouldn't dare. Try me." "Enough," Robert finally roared, his voice cracking with anguish. "Both of you, just stop. This is destroying us. We're tearing this family apart over a room." "It's not about a room," I cried, my voice trembling. "It's about respect. It's about not being treated like garbage in my own home. And you," he said, turning to Danielle, "don't seem to understand that this woman gave me life. You cannot ask me to treat her as if she is disposable." "And what about me?" Danielle shrieked. "Does my mother not matter? Does only she matter?" "I don't know what to do," Robert whispered, running his hands through his hair in desperation. "I don't know how to fix this." It was then that I stepped forward. I placed the manila folder Monica had given me on the coffee table. "Maybe this will help," I said, my voice steady. "Maybe if you see the truth, you'll understand what's really been happening here." Danielle's face went white. "What is that?" Robert picked up the folder. He opened it, and he began to read. I watched his face cycle through a storm of emotions: confusion, shock, disbelief, and finally, a look of pure, unadulterated horror. "What is this, Danielle?" he asked, his voice shaking. I can explain. These are your words. Planning to get my mother out of her own home, manipulating me. Is this real? Did you write this? Answer me." "Yes," she finally screamed, her composure breaking completely. "Yes, I wrote it. So what? Everything I said is true. Your mother is a controlling, manipulative—" "You manipulated me," Robert said, his voice a deathly whisper. "For months you made me believe my mother was the problem. And it was you all along." "Robert, I was just trying to do what was best for our family." "Best for our family? Destroying my relationship with the woman who raised me was what was best for our family?" The guests in the room, the silent jury, began to murmur and shift uncomfortably. One by one they started to leave, not wanting to witness the carnage that was to come. Soon, it was just us. Robert, Danielle, Mrs. Ellen, Mr. David, and me. Robert turned to me, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I saw my son again. His eyes were swimming with tears, his heart laid bare and broken. "Mom," he choked out, his voice shattered. "I'm so sorry." And what happened next was the one thing I had stopped allowing myself to hope for. "Mom, I'm sorry." The words were a torrent of grief, a dam of deception and denial finally breaking. He stumbled towards me, his arms wrapping around me in a desperate, clinging embrace. It was not the perfunctory hug of a man going through the motions. It was the hug of a lost child who had finally found his way home. "I'm so sorry," he sobbed into my shoulder, his body shaking with the force of his remorse. "I'm so sorry." I held him tightly, my own tears mingling with his, a silent current of forgiveness flowing between us. "Robert," Danielle's sharp voice cut through the moment like a shard of glass. "Are you really going to believe her?" Those messages were taken out of context. I was just venting to a friend. Robert pulled away from me, his face streaked with tears, but his eyes held a new, hard clarity. "No, Danielle. Not everyone methodically plans to drive their mother-in-law from her home. Not everyone spends months poisoning their husband's mind against his own mother. I didn't poison you, I opened your eyes." "You opened my eyes." Robert's voice rose, filled with a terrible, dawning comprehension. "Or did you blind me? Because looking at this, I see it all now. Every time my mother offered an opinion, you dismissed it. Every time I wanted to spend time with her, you created a distraction. You pushed me away from her, step by painful step. Because you wanted me to choose," Robert shouted, the full weight of her betrayal finally crashing down on him. "You wanted me to choose between my mother and you. And I was foolish enough, I was weak enough, to fall into your trap." Now I'm the villain, Danielle cried, tears of rage, not remorse, streaming down her face. And what about your mother? She's the one who kicked us out. She humiliated us. Because you put your mother in her bed? Robert shot back. In her private sanctuary. How did you expect her to react? I expected her to have some empathy. My mother was suffering. And my mother wasn't. Robert's voice broke again. When I screamed at her, when I told her to leave her own home, was she not suffering? He covered his face with his hands. Oh my God, he whispered. What have I done? Robert, you have to understand, Mrs. Ellen interjected, her tone condescending. Danielle was simply protecting her family. There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong, Robert looked at her, his eyes blazing. There's nothing wrong with lying, with manipulation, with trying to destroy the bond between a mother and her son? My attitude. I finally spoke, my voice stronger than I had felt in years. What attitude was that? The attitude of opening my home to you? Of caring for my granddaughter? Of trying to make you feel welcome? The attitude of sticking your nose where it doesn't belong? Mrs. Allen sneered. Of not understanding that you are no longer the most important woman in his life? No, Mom. Robert's voice was now as cold and sharp as a winter wind. You have no right to be here. This is my mother's house, and you are no longer welcome in it, Mrs. Ellen stared at him aghast. You have to leave, now. You and your daughter have used this family, you have used me, and I was too blind to see it. Robert, you can't talk to my mother like that, Danielle whimpered. Why not, he demanded. You both spoke to my mother like that. Why must my mother endure disrespect, but yours is above reproach? Because my mother raised me, Danielle sobbed. She went through a terrible divorce. She deserves respect. And my mother doesn't, Robert yelled, his pain and fury erupting. My mother, who built this home with my father, who worked every day of her life for me, who held me together when my father died. Does she not deserve respect? The question hung in the air, unanswerable. Danielle had no reply. My son was fighting for me. He was seeing me. Robert, Danielle tried again, her voice shifting to a soft, manipulative purr. I know you're angry. We can fix this. No, Robert said, shaking his head. We can't. Because I don't trust you anymore, Danielle. I look at you, and I don't know who you are. You didn't just hurt me. You hurt our family. You tried to sever my daughter's relationship with her grandmother. All for what? For a house. He turned back to me, his face a canvas of agony. Mom, there are no words to express how sorry I am. I have been the worst son imaginable. I broke my promise to you, the promise I made when Dad died. I didn't just leave you. I cast you out. And Dad must be so ashamed of me. He adored you. He taught me to adore you. And I forgot everything. Robert, I said gently, my heart breaking for his pain. Your father would be proud that you finally opened your eyes. That is what he taught you. To be a good man. To admit when you are wrong. Do you forgive me? His voice was that of a small, lost boy. I forgive you, I said without hesitation. I will always forgive you. You are my son. This is ridiculous, Danielle scoffed. Stop, Robert commanded, his voice now one of authority. He walked over and gently took Sophia from Mrs. Ellen's arms, rocking his now crying daughter. Listen to me very carefully. This ends today. Danielle, you and your mother will pack a bag, and you will leave this house. You will find a hotel or an apartment, but you will not stay here. And you? She asked, her voice trembling. I am going with you, he said, his eyes on his daughter. Because you are my wife and Sophia is my daughter, and I need time to think. But we will not be living off your mother. We will find our own place, with our own money. And you will get professional help, therapy, because what you did is not healthy. And if this marriage has any chance, you need to fix what is broken inside you. It's not negotiable. And one more thing, he added, his gaze sweeping the room. This fraudulent deed of gift. We are canceling it. This house belongs to my mother, and my mother alone. As it always should have been. He walked over to me, Sophia asleep in his arms. Mom, I know I don't deserve it, but please, don't take Sophia out of your life. She needs her grandmother. I reached out and gently stroked my granddaughter's soft hair. I would never do that, I whispered. She is my blood. I love her. Thank you, he whispered back. and he kissed my forehead. A long, tender kiss filled with a universe of regret and love. Then he turned. Let's go. Pack only what you need. We're leaving in 1 hour. That hour was a silent, tense whirlwind. Robert stayed with me in the living room while the two women packed upstairs. When they finally descended, their faces grim, I stood at the doorway and watched them load their suitcases into the car. I watched my family fracture. Robert was the last to leave. He paused in front of me. I'll call you, he promised. Every day. We're going to fix this. Somehow. I love you, Mom. I love you too, son. The car drove away, and I was left standing on the threshold of my reclaimed, now painfully empty house. Mr. David had stayed with me, a silent, supportive presence. I walked back inside and sank into Michael's favorite armchair. And I wept. I wept for what I had lost, for what I had gained, and for the uncertain road that lay ahead. But through the tears, I felt something I had not felt in a very long time, a flicker of peace. I had fought for my dignity, I had drawn my line, and I had won. But it was a victory that felt strangely, deeply, like loss. The first 3 days were the hardest. The silence in the house was a physical weight, pressing down on me. It was no longer the peaceful quiet of solitude, but the hollow echo of absence. Every room was haunted by ghosts of a happier time. Robert as a child doing homework at the kitchen table, Michael reading the newspaper in his armchair, Sophia's laughter chasing butterflies in the yard. Memories were landmines, and I was walking through a field of them. Robert called every evening, just as he had promised. The conversations were short, stilted, landscapes of unspoken words. How are you, Mom? I'm fine. And you? Fine. Sophia sends her love. Give her a kiss for me. I will. I love you, Mom. I love you too, son. Each call was a fresh reminder of the chasm between us. On the 4th night, my phone rang long after our usual time. It was 11 o'clock. Hello, Patricia. It was Robert, but his voice was frayed, broken. I need you. Can you please come over? My heart leaped into my throat. What is it? Is Sophia all right? Sophia's fine, but I need my mom. I didn't hesitate. He sent me an address, a small apartment complex in the center of town. I drove there on autopilot, my mind a storm of worry. He opened the door the moment I knocked. He looked like he had been through a war. His eyes were red-rimmed, his hair a mess. What happened? I asked, stepping into the Spartan living room. Danielle left, he said, his voice a raw whisper. She took Sophia. She went to her mother's. She said she needs space. We had a fight. I told her I needed complete honesty from her, that I needed to understand everything, and she just exploded. She said if I was going to keep siding with you, then she was done. He sank onto the sofa, his head in his hands, and I let her go, Mom. I didn't stop her. Because in that moment, I realized something. I don't know who she is. I have been married to this woman for 6 years, and I don't know her at all. Everything I thought we had was built on a foundation of lies. She told me she respected you, that she was grateful. And I believed her, because I wanted to believe her. But it was all a performance, and I was her willing audience. It's not your fault, Robert, I said softly. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a self-loathing that terrified me. Yes, it is. I chose to believe her over my own mother. I doubted you, for a woman who was playing me like a fiddle. I've been thinking, he continued, his voice gaining a desperate momentum, about all the little things, the subtle comments, the small twists of the truth, how she would always plant these tiny seeds of doubt about you. They seemed so insignificant at the time, but they grew. They grew until they choked out everything else, and it worked. Without even realizing it, I started to see you through her eyes, not as my loving mother, but as this controlling, intrusive woman she had invented. And now, I asked gently, how do you see me now? He met my gaze, and for the first time in so long, I saw a profound clarity in his eyes. I see you for who you have always been, my mother, the strongest woman I have ever known, the one who built our home, who worked tirelessly to give me a future, who held me together when I thought my life was over. And I am so ashamed, he choked out. I am so ashamed that I was so weak, so easily led. You are not weak, I told him, my voice firm. You were manipulated. A weak man doesn't recognize his mistake. A weak man doesn't ask for forgiveness. A weak man doesn't call his mother at 11 o'clock at night because he needs her. You did all of those things. That is strength, Robert. That is the man your father raised you to be. We sat in silence for a while, the shared grief, a strange comfort. Then he asked the question that was weighing on his soul. Do you think my marriage can be saved? Do you want to save it? I asked in return. He was quiet for a long time. For Sophia, yes, I don't want her to grow up in a broken home. But for me, I don't know if I can ever trust Danielle again. How can you build a life with someone when you are constantly questioning their motives? She says she wants to save it, he added, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. But only on the condition that I stop prioritizing you. Those were her exact words. And what did you tell her? I told her that you are my mother, that you will always be a priority in my life, and that if she cannot accept that, then we have no future. He was finally seeing it, the toxic, possessive nature of her love. Can I tell you something? I asked. I think Danielle was afraid of losing you. Afraid that your love for me was something she could never compete with. Fear is not rational, Robert, and I think instead of facing her own insecurities, she chose to attack the perceived source of them. Me. I'm not excusing what she did. It was monstrous. But I am trying to understand it. Hurt people hurt people. And your wife is a very, very hurt person. How can you be so compassionate? He asked, his voice filled with awe. Because I am a mother, and mothers learn to see the person behind the pain. We learn to forgive, not because our children always deserve it, but because we deserve peace. Would you give her a second chance? He asked. I don't know, I answered honestly. But I know this. If you are going to try, you cannot do it alone. You both need help, professional help, to learn how to communicate, how to rebuild trust from the ashes. He nodded slowly. You're right. Dad would have told me to fight for my family. Your father would also have told you to demand that I be treated with respect, I added gently. He never tolerated anyone disrespecting me. And he would expect the same from you. I stayed with him until 2 o'clock in the morning, talking, listening, helping him sort through the wreckage of his life. When I drove home, the sky was beginning to pale in the east. I felt a fragile, tentative hope blooming in my chest. When I walked into my house, the silence no longer felt like an enemy. It felt like a friend. I sat on my bed and spoke to Michael's photograph on my nightstand. Our boy is going to be all right, my love. He has your heart. He's going to find his way. Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from Robert. Thank you for tonight, Mom. I talked to Danielle. We're going to try therapy. No promises. But we're going to try. I love you. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I smiled. A real, genuine smile. There was a light at the end of this long, dark tunnel. It was distant, but it was there. And for now, that was enough. The journey ahead would be arduous, but for the first time, I believed that healing was not just possible but inevitable. We were a family broken, but not beyond repair. And we would rebuild, one painful, honest, and hopeful day at a time.